Hey everyone, so in today's video I'm going to be doing another Lightroom video. The last one I did was pretty well received and I'm super excited about this one in particular because I actually thought I lost the original photos to this photo shoot. I actually took these pictures in the summer, so it's been quite a few months since I took them and I still really like them. So I'm going to be showing you how to edit two photos. Right now we're going to be working on this particular photo of my friend Ashley. Of course, she was in the last photo shoot as well. This editing is pretty simple on this one. It's just a bit of coloring. So the first thing that I'm going to do is scroll down and enable profile corrections, wherever that is. So I did take this on my 50mm 1.8 on my Canon. I don't know what it is. I think it's the T3, so pretty simple setup. And then what I'm going to do is change the exposure, and I'm going to change the exposure to -0.3. So just take that down a little bit. Then I'm going to go to the highlights and I'm going to just bump those all the way down just to -100. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the shadows, except I'm going to bring them all the way up. Then I'm going to scroll down to the blacks and I'm going to up the blacks by 22 just to make the image a little less harsh. I wanted to, I guess, go for a bit of the film look. And before I forget, I'm just gonna add some grain like right now because I'm gonna forget at the end of the video. Usually I add grain after I'm done my pictures. And I just use the Lightroom preset. I just go into the grain folder here and I click on light because I don't want too much grain. So after I'm done the blacks, I'm going to move down to saturation. And for the saturation, I actually upped it by 19 for this particular photo. I wanted to get a brighter tone. So for the tone curve, I'm just going to input that in right now. You guys can see what I'm doing on the screen. It's kind of just a basic mellow S curve. It's not that dramatic, so I just cut the blacks a bit. And then for the shadow point, I brought it down a little bit, but not very much. For the midpoint, I brought that up a bit, but not by much. And then for the highlights point, I also bumped that up just a little bit. Here's a quick before and after of what we have so far. Okay, so now we're going to go down to the HSL tab. So let's start in hue. So the first thing that I'm going to do for hue is actually shift the oranges to 53, just so that we can get a little more yellow tones in the flowers. And then I'm going to shift the yellows to +74 to just get more green tones in the yellows. Then for the greens, I'm going to bump it down to -31. And that's just going to add some warmth. So then I'm going to move into saturation. And in particular for this, I took the saturation of the reds down by -4%. And I also took down the oranges by -17%. I then brought up the greens 47. That's just to brighten up the image. This looks so funny right now, but I promise it's not going to look this crazy later. And I actually brought the aquas all the way down to -100. As for the blues, I brought that down to -67. I think I was trying to get rid of a lot of the fringing in the sky and like the weird, super bright looking fake sky. As you can see, that desaturated that quite a bit. So now we're going to pop into luminance, and the first thing I did was I brought down the reds to -35. This is one of my favorite things to do, especially for our pictures of Ashley, because she's like really pink lips and like really pink cheeks, so it really brings out the color. Particularly, of course, watch out just so that it's not screwing up anything else in your image. And then for luminance, I'm going to bring the oranges up to 63. As for the yellows, I'm going to bring that up to +27, just to brighten up the flowers a bit. And then for the greens, I'm going to bring that up to +100, so just max that all the way out. And then for the aquas, I'm going to bring that up to 14. And for the blues, I'm going to bring that up to 5. So for split toning, I actually am going to be putting like a bluish tone in the highlights. So that's going to be hue 181 and the saturation is +22. As you can see, it adds a bit of blue right here. And I really like the blue highlights on this particular shoot. Then for the shadows, the tint that I'm going to choose is actually just leaving it as 0, and then I'm going to up the saturation to 27. So that gives the photo immediately a much better vintage look. Then I'm going to shift down to calibration, which is probably one of my favorite tabs to fiddle around with. It's honestly so fun. So the first thing I'm going to do is red primary, and I'm just going to bring that down to -4. Then for green primary, I'm going to up it to 55 just to get more of those natural tones back in there, get rid of some of that yellow, bring in a little bit more true bluish green. And then I'm going to move down to blue primary and move that down to -44. So the next picture that I'm going to be working on is this one in particular. It's just a simple garden portrait. If you guys were wondering where I shot this in particular, it's actually just in my front yard. So that was fun. It's actually a really tiny garden, so it was really creative, and I was in much pain trying to take these photos, but I'm really happy with them. I think this particular edit I'm not as happy with as in the first one, but I thought it was a different photo, so it might be interesting to watch me edit anyway. Anyway, so the first thing that I'm going to do is enable profile corrections as usual. So the first thing that I'm going to do is adjust the temperature, and I actually am just going to up this to 3 just to add a little bit of warmth to the photo. And then I'm going to take the tint back to -3 to add a little bit of green to the photo. So after that, I'm going to be playing around with exposure a bit and knocking that up to 0.1. So as for the highlights, in the original photo, for some reason, I only brought them down -49. I'm actually just going to bring them down all the way since the sky is kind of blown out. And then I'm going to jump down to the shadows and up that by 77. As for the blacks, I'm going to up that to 63 just to brighten up the image a little bit more. And then I'm going to go scroll down to the tone curve. Anyway, I'm going to scroll down to hue, and the first thing I'm going to do is shift the reds a little bit more to orange, and I put that at 22. Then I'm going to shift the oranges back down to red, that around -9. As for the greens, I did the greens at about -18. As for blues, I'm going to bring the blues a little bit more towards aqua and push that down to -19. Now in the saturation tab, I'm going to up the saturation of the oranges by 17, up the greens by 1, which is like a very minuscule amount, but for some reason I did in the original. And then for aquas, I'm going to bring that down to -48. For blues, I'm going to bring them up 17, just to add a little bit of saturation. As for luminance, I'm going to bring that up 45. And then bring down the aqua by 55. I think it's just because there was a lot of fringing on the trees. So I wanted to cut back on that a little bit. As for split toning, again, one of my favorite parts, the tone that I'm going to actually choose for highlights is 56. And 56 I think is like a yellowish tone. And the saturation on that was 25. Then for this one, I did do some noise reduction. I did like 24. I probably wouldn't do as much currently. So I'm keeping the luminance at 12. I don't want to go overboard. I'm also going to add some grain. So the same preset in the Lightroom preset that you can get. It's just under the grain folder. It should just come with Lightroom, I think. And I do light on that just because I like how that looks. And as for camera calibration, for green primary, I upped that to 84. Which really brings different colors, like it's extreme. I might pull back a bit on that just because I don't want it to be that crazy. So maybe 71. And then for blue primary, I'm going to do -24 on that one. And again, for this one, I think I'm just going to pull it back up a little bit just because the tones are a little bit crazy. I hope this video was helpful in showing you guys my Lightroom process. For now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
She ran